All stations, how do you read?
Radio 5, Victor Tango Mike India.
Radio 5, Victor Tango Uniform Yankee Victor.
Thank you for joining again. Okay. All right. What we're talking about the desired flight. Now you need to know earlier men used to travel on horses, men and women, of course, horses and other animals. Then they started making carts of wood with wheels on which they used to sit, and their only engine the driving force of the cart used to be animal or animal power. There were hand carts also. Men used to pull the carts. So basically, any person who is moving the carriage in which you have passengers or yourself or any cargo or goods, it becomes an automobile or a vehicle. The word automobile means something that moves on its own. You don't need a man to drive it or an animal to drive it. So you have cars, bikes. A bicycle, cycle cannot be termed as an automobile because it does not move on its own. But an electric bike can be termed as automobile.
The Radio 2.
If you cannot read me, you text me now. You text me. Yeah, I'll see it in the text. Okay, how do you read me now?
Radio 2, sir.
All stations. How do you read me now? How about now? One, two, three, four, five, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. How do you read? Why are we losing connection every now and then? Let's see how it goes once more. As an aviation student, you're required to know the reason why every sort of aircraft flies. Now, the word aircraft, it means any machine, either lighter or heavier, that can support itself in air through certain aerodynamic reactions. Now, there is a very refined definition of an aircraft which will say that they're lighter than aircrafts and heavier than aircrafts. So, lighter than air aircrafts, they support themselves in air through buoyancy of the air. Air acts like a fluid. You create a gas which creates a mass which is lighter than air, fill it in a balloon, and automatically that gas will rise up. And that gas, as it rises up, it will take your balloon up with it. Basically, it is the gas that is taking you up. Whatever the weight of your balloon is, it could be 50 kgs, 100 kgs or maybe 500 kgs along with the passengers in the basket. Everyone in a balloon is lifted with the force generated by the gas, the upward force. What is this gas? The gas is mixture of different gases. Basically, it's air. Air is a mixture of gases. When you have sufficient amount of air, the air can lift people also. Like you must have seen in very severe cyclones and twisters, cars they flow away. Big houses made of wood they get flown away or blown away. Correct? Why does this happen? It is because the air mass, either the mass is a lot or the velocity of the air mass is very high. Basically, say if you have certain amount of air, like my fistful of air, and you give it very, very, very high velocity, then this air can create a force to push something that cannot be pushed by the same amount of air at a very lower airspeed. This is the property of this invisible air or the mixture of gases that you see around you, something that we know as atmosphere. So you need to understand whatever is happening in lifting the airplanes up, basically flight or flying, it is because of the air only. If you can transform, if you can transform the air in certain ways, then it will definitely help you fly. Now there are various ways to transform the air and make it give us certain aerodynamic forces. So we need to see what are these forces that we require to fly. And we need to understand how do we get this property of air without creating a cyclone, without damaging the aircraft, having complete maneuverability. Maneuvering means controlling the aircraft as per your desire. Stability means rigidity. It is very important that the aircraft is stable. Plus, it is very important that you can maneuver the aircraft up to your wish. So, like I have said earlier, in other sessions to other people, aviation is a science of compromise. You need the best of everything. In that, you have to let go of a lot of best things also. Slowly, the relationship between maneuverability and stability. It is a part of your technical as well as navigation syllabus. If you cannot generate that force that you need for flight, the force that I'm talking about, then your plane will not be able to sustain itself in air and it will fall down. It is called stalling. Whenever the aircraft does not have enough amount of air generating the required forces, it stalls. Stalling means falling down uncontrollably. There are times when the aircraft can recover from a stall, STALL stall, but that is only with a few aircraft, smaller aircraft. And sometimes it is based upon the inherent stability of the aircraft also. Why am I emphasizing more on stability? Because it is something you'll be seeing at the end of your technical aerodynamics part. But stability is something like this. Say this is a very long airplane. Let's assume this is the body of 777. Let's say a sudden gust of wind comes and it disbalances or causes an imbalance in your aircraft. Stability is that design feature given to every airplane that automatically it will damp out all the oscillations and go and fly straight ahead. This is what is stability. No matter what disturbance will happen to you, you'll automatically dampen them and gradually go back. This is known as inherent stability. It is there in every aircraft. What is maneuvering? Maneuvering is okay. I want to turn right, I'll go right. I want to go left, I'll go left. If your aircraft is too stable, you're trying to go left and the aircraft will try to come back to normal on its own. You don't need too much of stability. But why is this happening? It is all because of certain forces acting on the aircraft, and the forces are due to air, and thus the air is acting in a very dynamic nature. The word dynamic means in motion. Okay. Now, one thing you need to learn about this air is that this air has a lot of pressure. The pressure that you all are feeling right now, which seems like negligible, is actually the maximum pressure exhibited by the atmosphere around you. And this pressure, which does not have any force on you, is known as static pressure. Static pressure. Okay. The moment the air starts moving here, there, or you start moving through the air, the wind that you feel is the dynamic pressure felt by you on that certain part that is facing the air. Okay. In aviation, in heavier than aircrafts, in the aircrafts that you're preparing to fly for leading airlines, and those aircrafts that you will train into will only fly in air with respect to the dynamic pressure acting on the aircraft. Which pressure? Dynamic pressure. Static pressure is just there. It will not help you take off. Only dynamic pressure will help you take off. And in order to create that amount of dynamic pressure, you need to move the aircraft at a very high speed through the air. You need to move the aircraft through a high speed through the air, so it simulates a feel of very high dynamic pressure going on the aircraft. This pressure is known as relative airflow. The airflow, if the aircraft is standing here on the airport, parked at a place, the dynamic pressure is not acting. To lift the aircraft. So what we are doing is, we are moving the aircraft through this air to get a very high dynamic airflow to create that dynamic pressure. This is known as relative airflow. Are you understanding what is relative airflow? Relative airflow is the aircraft moving through the air at a high speed to create that differential or the dynamic pressure that we need for liftoff. So whenever I'm going to show you the flow of air over the aircraft and how it generates lift. By the word lift itself, you realize lifting something up. We have lifts in buildings, we have lifts at construction sites. On a day-to-day basis, we lift so many things. We lift our phones, we lift things from the ground in the house, in the kitchen, and so on. Lifting, we know lift understands taking something up. The same force is required for the aircraft to go up. What gives us this force? Force is the reactions of the air on certain parts of the aircraft. What are these reactions basically? What is this part of the air? This is the dynamic pressure. How do we get this dynamic pressure? It is due to the relative motion of the air through the wind, or the relative airflow. We say relative, it means it is relative to our motion. If you can increase your airspeed, you will get more pressure. There are times when if you overspeed, the pressure will be so much more. Let's say you want this straight and level flight, okay? You want to fly like this straight. This is your wing of the airplane. You want to go straight and level, and you have this much amount of air going above and below you, like two fingers showing the air. If you increase your airspeed, the flow will increase and you'll start lifting more, but you don't need that. But you don't realize. Maybe you are, making a mistake, or maybe the headwind is too strong, which you have not accounted for. Further, if you increase the airspeed, the flow will increase and it will further cause the wing to go like this. And this angle that the wing is making with respect to your relative airflow, like this, is known as the angle of attack. Okay. This angle of attack has a very small range. Maybe from -4 degrees to say -14 degrees, -12 degrees, or -20 or -30, not more than that. So you understand the range for us to keep our wings with respect to the relative airflow is only this much. But if I overspeed, what will happen? My wing will become like this, and the moment you cross your angle of attack, the air pushes your wing in this direction and you stall. This is how stall happens. It is just the air, the invisible air that we're breathing right now, doing all this to your aircraft. You need to fix that in your mind before you start seeing the diagrams and aerodynamics and formulas. How does the wind react on your wing? Now we are talking about the wing, not just the aircraft, but the wing. The airflow hits the forward part of the wing. The forward part of the wing is known as leading edge of the wing. LE, leading edge of the wing. These are technical terms now you will see forever. Leading edge. Leading edge is the front side of the wing. The air hits the leading edge, then it gets divided into two parts. One flows from over the wing, one flows from the lower part of the wing. And the air distributes itself and travels like this, and then escapes the wing. It is like that. Meets back behind. This is how air functions. If you have learned a little bit in meteorology, you'll see air has a tendency to balance itself from high pressure to low pressure. Correct? Wherever there will be more air and wherever there will be less air, more air will try to flow towards the less air. And the same concept is utilized by the air in your aircrafts to lift the aircraft. This is all that you're going to learn in your 33 or 40% of your air technical. Are you getting it? This concept and learning this in detail and learning about other things that impact your lift, increase your angle of attack, reduce the airspeed. So we do a lot of stuff later on to reduce the airspeed so that we can reduce the amount of fuel, but increase our lift. You will see in previous, like many years ago, we did not have all these features. So we used a lot of fuel to generate the speed required to lift the air. That's why the jet engines that we used to use used to be very long jet engines, very noisy and very fuel eating engines, we call them. Right now, in present, we have advanced the technology, advanced the aerodynamics, and the formula which defines lift. There are multiple elements. We increase other elements and our lift increases. We can keep certain things constant. You need to have this logic as you move ahead. Technical is something that will really teach you everything about your aircraft and how it flies. Technical as a subject is the study of the aircraft itself, the engines of the aircraft, the structure of the aircraft, the physics behind the aircraft, and the systems in the aircraft. So basically, with this subject, you will be mastering your knowledge about any aircraft, because all aircrafts work on the same principle. Then after learning technical general, when you read any technical specific, you will be easily able to understand, okay, so the engine for this aircraft is like this, the wings are like this is the lift coefficient, this is the angle of attack range, these are the primary control surfaces, and so on. It is like that. Are you understanding what we are going to do? Are you understanding what this is all about? And thus we call this air, what do we call this? We call this aerodynamics, because the air is dynamic in nature. It's the movement of air, moving air. The word dynamic itself means something in motion. And static means something that is static. You all have this absent face or look on your faces. Am I not audible or am I not talking in English? I'm a little sleep deprived, so I might be talking nonsense also and not know about it. If that's the case, please tell me. Sparsh, can you rephrase what I have said so far?
Sure, sir. So far, you have teach us about the wings, the part of the wings, engine, dynamic pressure lift, and balloons, airship.
Okay. How about you, Varun? What are we talking about technical general as a subject?
Yeah, sir. So we are talking about the forces and aerodynamic forces. What actually are required for the aircraft to fly, and how we convert the static pressure for our need into the dynamic pressure, and the effect of angle of attack into stalling and all.
Mhm. How about you, Utkarsh? What is the main
So
element of nature in concern in aerodynamics?
it is about the the air is the main element, and it helps to lift up the lift up the aircraft, and it helps in producing like till now we have studied about how the aircraft can lift up by the air. It's like it's through the dynamic pressure.
Very good. Dynamic pressure of the air, the dynamic flow of the air. So which part of the aircraft actually takes these forces and lifts the aircraft with what I have said?
So the wing.
Uh-huh. Can you describe a little more about the airflow over the wings?
So the air flows through the wing and it creates lift.
Where, where does the airflow on the sand?
Radio 1.
How do you read me now?
Radio 4, sir.
So where do you think the airflow that we impacts the wing acts on the how do you read me now? All stations, do you read me 5? Good. Hussein, where does this airflow hit the wing on the aircraft? The wing,
So,
which
so
part
it
of the wing?
goes from the leading edge to the trailing edge.
Correct. Can you tell me more about how the airflow behaves when it hits the leading edge?
So I did not understand the question.
How does the flow behave the moment it hits the leading edge of the wing?
So it becomes streamlined, uh, and
No,
then
no, no. I
after,
just said, try to remember. I said this is the airflow, this is the wing. It hits and it gets divided in two flows, right? One over the wing, one below the wing. Correct?
yes, sir.
Upper part of the wing and lower part of the wing. And then once the wing is over, it merges and goes back again. Correct? Remember,
Yes, sir.
this is what happens to the airflow when it hits the leading edge of the wing. Yeah, Utkarsh, please give us a brief.
So Till now, we have studied about how the balloon aircraft. So do you read?
Yeah, please go ahead.
So till now, we have studied about the balloon aircrafts, how they fly. They fly through the mixture of the gases, and we have studied about the we have studied about the how heavy aircrafts fly. It flies through the air pressures. That's it. Sir.
Okay, Mukul, please give us a brief. Good answer, everyone. Utkarsh, you had a chance to answer twice. Very good.
Okay, we looked how an airplane generally fly. So currently we saw about the air pressure. There are mainly two air pressures: static pressure and dynamic pressure. So a static pressure is all over around us. So in case of an aircraft, the static pressure is all around the aircraft. And there if a pressure external pressure is given to an aircraft from any direction, that is called a dynamic pressure. And if that dynamic pressure is uh, given opposite to the aircraft which is rolling, it creates a lift. Lift is created in a form when the dynamic pressure, that is the wind, uh, attacks the wings, and the wind that is flowing gets divided in two, that is from upper and the lower. That differentiate of pressure makes the aircraft lift.
Very good. Very good. So basically, dynamic pressure is the pressure when the aircraft moves through the air. Okay. Although I'll tell you something about dynamic pressure and what students usually think about it like. Because you're moving through the air, you feel certain force. But when you're not moving, you don't feel the force. So we think that dynamic pressure is always more than static pressure, but it is not wrong. It is not right. You are used to not feeling the static pressure. The static pressure is too much. If the static pressure is 20,000, then dynamic pressure is only 2,000. That is the ratio anytime. So remember that, never think, although you feel the force of dynamic pressure, don't think dynamic pressure is too much because the force is only on a small part that you experience it on, while static pressure is everywhere. That increases it. Okay, Sujal, your turn. Give me any 3 points that you have understood.
So that the dynamic pressure helps. Can you hear me? So that the dynamic pressure helps the aircraft to lift. The mixture of gases. Um,
Air is the mixture of gases. Correct.
yes. And when
One more point. Think about it.
static pressure is much higher than the dynamic pressure.
Very good. Very good. Very well. Very well. Abhi Preeti?
So we learned about the pressure, static pressure and dynamic pressure. The pressure exerted by the air when it is not moving is called static pressure, and the pressure exerted when it is flowing is dynamic pressure. We require dynamic pressure for the aircraft to lift. So either the wind should be blowing at more speed or the aircraft should be moving at a greater speed For that, we require a huge amount of thrust, which is provided by the engine, and the air flows around the wind. I think the more air flows below the wind, so because of it, we get the lift. Yeah, that's it.
Very well said. But I think that it would be very nice for us now to, visualize. And your visualization will always happen when you learn to make the simple sketches about the cross section of the wing. Reason being, now we already know the wing is what is giving us the lift, and the flow of the air, which is the relative airflow, and a little bit of control features that control the lift, basically the angle of attack. In order to understand the angle of attack, we will see what are the dimensions of the wing. Just like we have a human body and we say the eye is to see, the ears are to hear, and the nose is to smell, the aircraft can be studied in a similar way. And so can be the wing of the aircraft. The greatest invention that has helped us have aviation the way it is the shape or the cross section of the wing. Okay. There is a reason why I'm showing this hand here and not showing you any aircraft, because this hand, the shape that you see from here, is actually resembling the shape that is the invention that has changed the dynamics of aviation, brought us aircrafts that can fly at a very, very high speed, sonic, subsonic, supersonic, and so on. And God knows what more is there for us to invent, because we are still relying on old inventions and making them better and better. Of course, we had, what do we say, Concorde that defied the pace at which we travel. So I know the dynamics behind Concorde also. Once you learn general aerodynamics, you'll understand that Concorde also, why it was high speed, what enabled it to be so high speed and so successful. Hardly any accidents with Concorde, hardly. Just one accident, just a couple of accidents, and one major accident, and it was called off. One of the main reasons is the way the wing was shaped. It's called swept back. You need it on high-speed aircrafts. You need it on high-speed aircrafts. The wings that you see like this, the wings on other commercial liners, those wings cannot fly beyond a certain speed. They will break. But swept back wings too. So all this is a part of your studies. Now, I have heard there are multiple startups, like new companies. They are so gathering investment and doing R&D into creating supersonic travel again, just like Concorde, but much more comfortable and much more affordable. Concorde was not comfortable; it was very expensive. That was the case. So let's see when that happens. One of the companies is Boom Space. It is very strange to see that the investment that they are getting is much lesser than investments given to websites and software startups. It will happen. They paid super speed at an affordable rate. Do you think we will fly normal airliners? So where would these all planes go then? These planes that we see on flight radar, right? So many of them. So yeah, a lot goes. But coming back to our topic, I'm going to show you all everything. I just want to share one thing with you all. Let's see if I can before we start. So what is the cross section of the wing and what really helps you take off? What is it called as? There is a theory behind the first human-powered aircraft also, the Wright Flyer. They did not have this cross section. Okay, their wing was not like this, but still they were able to fly. But they generated the effect similar to this effect, and they understood it with the help of a cardboard box that gave them the breakthrough. When one of them was playing with, not playing, like handling a cardboard box, that gave them the idea to make wings, a biplane, and that worked. Even these drones that you see, these drones use the same aerodynamic concepts that are applicable to rotary aircrafts. Aircrafts with rotary wings, just like helicopters, they also work on the same principle. And you'll be surprised to see that the same aerodynamic principle impacts your engines also. The engines that have a fan ahead of them, the aircrafts that have an engine that has a propeller, the air reacts in the same way in the propellers, the way it does on the wing of the airplane. And when you talk about a jet engine, the air reacts in the same way, and the blades of a jet engine are also of the shape that I'm going to show you. This shape is of primary concern to you in aviation because you're going to see a lot of it. And if you see it and don't spot it, it means you're lacking in your understanding. Arpita, welcome back. Nice of you to join again with the technical difficulties. We have just been sharing and talking, so you've not missed much. Now we are going to start. So, the most important aspect of technical journal is aerodynamics. It is also known as theory of flight. Now, for every aircraft, when the aircraft is at rest, okay? When the aircraft is at rest, which force acts on the aircraft? Weight. Weight is something that always acts on your aircraft. The weight formula is mass into acceleration due gravity. That is mass into 9.8 meters per second square. Simple. If you can determine the mass of your airplane, you can determine the weight of your airplane. But luckily, all your weighing scales directly give you the weight of the aircraft. So you don't need to calculate the gravity, but you need to know the formula. Forces acting on aircraft on a takeoff roll. What is a takeoff roll? Takeoff roll is when you are running at a high speed on the runway just before takeoff. Okay. So this is your second config for your airplane. Your aircraft is moving in air. So what are the forces acting? The first force will always be there, weight. The second force during takeoff roll is T. T is thrust. What is thrust? Force of forward motion generated by engines. Thrust is a force of forward motion generated by engines. The moment you start developing thrust, something undesirable starts to happen. As we know, aviation is a science of compromise. We can't really help but face this undesirable aspect. What is this undesirable aspect? This undesirable aspect is something that acts opposite to thrust. And this is known as drag. Drag is a force that acts in the opposite direction to thrust. Drag is like a villain to thrust. But we cannot anytime ever eliminate drag. We can only minimize drag. And we take advantage of drag during landings. During landings, we try to increase the drag in safe amounts. But during takeoff, we try to minimize the drag. You won't have drag if you don't have thrust. If you want thrust to move the aircraft forward, you will get drag. This drag will be further divided into many parts. Those are important for you. There will be induced drag, parasite drag, and many more drags. So what is drag? Force opposite to thrust. All right. Now let's talk about forces acting on aircraft in flight. Plane is smiling, it's finally in the air. The first force will always be there, What was it? It was weight. We already had thrust. Because of thrust, we had drag. The arrow mark shows you the direction of the force. Thrust is forward acting force, drag is rearward acting force, and weight is downward acting force. When we are in flight because of this lovely force that we call as lift. What is lift? Force that lifts and supports the aircraft over ground in air. If you don't have lift, students, your plane will not stay in air. It will fall down due to weight. In order to have yourself in the air, you need to have lift. In order to get the aircraft in air, you need to counteract the weight. Weight is countered by lift. Thus, to lift your aircraft in air, lift required is equal to weight. Remember, all the lift that you require to fly the aircraft is the force equal to the weight of the aircraft. You don't need more lift, more than that. That's it. So you will see lift and weight, thrust and drag. They are opposite forces. Thus, lift and weight are forces on aircraft opposite in nature. And thrust and drag are forces opposite in nature. Okay. So these are the four forces acting on the aircraft. And There are pilots who have CPL with them, but they don't know about all the four forces. They are able to only answer after they think about 10 minutes or 15 minutes because they're so cut off with their initial ground training wherever they have flown. Not all, of course, but I've seen many. That should not happen with you or anyone, I would say, because this is like ABC. This is like adding salt to your food. You cannot live without it. It's like cooking your food before eating. It's like any basic thing that you do in your life. So, what have you understood so far? Think about it. Take a couple of moments. Think, nicely think. See if you get any doubts or questions and then ask. This is your time to think, analyze. Because now we have entered on a deeper into learning about how planes fly. Basically, your dream to become a pilot is one step closer to you. Every time when you will fly or when you're flying, a good pilot is always aware about what is happening on the wing. And anytime anything goes wrong, the pilot is able to understand the reasons behind it. And this really helps the pilot to be a very good pilot, to control the airplane as if we are controlling our bodies. You have to consider your aircraft to be an extension of your body in the long run, just like you do with your vehicles. Develop a good hand and good hold over the aircraft. It will happen with experience and it will happen with your understanding of what really makes it fly. You will feel everything. With the noise of the engine, you will feel its thrust setting. With the rigidity in its motion, you will feel the strength of the wind around you. All that is possible. Now that is a true pilot. You will be like one of those wherein you just smell the air and you'll know how it feels. Basically, they don't really smell the air, they feel the force of the air. They check the visibility. It is like that. But it is a saying that, okay, I've smelled the air. But this air is what is causing you lift. We have not yet seen the concept behind how lift acts, okay? But we have seen these four forces and how these forces start acting on an aircraft. Now we'll be studying about lift in detail. We don't need to study much about weight. We will be learning about thrust in detail, but when that will happen when we are doing engines. In aerodynamics, what we are going to do is we're going to learn about lift and drag in detail. So take a couple of minutes, think, revise right now in the class, and then tell me if you have any questions.
So can you explain how static pressure and dynamic pressures are counted in all these forces? Victor Tango Mike India.
Static pressure is always acting on all parts of your airplane, always, from all sides, on all parts. Dynamic pressure is only acting on those parts which are facing the relative airflow. So the pressure that you actually feel on those parts, they will be the nose of the aircraft, the leading edge of the wings. That's it. And maybe leading edge of your control surfaces on the back of the aircraft. That pressure is actually the total pressure, which is a combination of static pressure and dynamic pressure. You need to understand that also. And only those places that are facing the relative airflow will be subjected to this additional increase in pressure, which is the dynamic pressure. And when you think about it like this, then the total pressure is actually more than the static pressure, not the dynamic pressure. Dynamic pressure is just a little amount, but the total pressure which acts on these forces, correction, on these surfaces that are facing the force. So when we have to look at it, the static pressure is always acting on all sides of the aircraft, everywhere. And as the aircraft moves through the air, the dynamic pressure hits on those surfaces that are facing the air. When the plane is moving straight, it will be on the nose, a little part behind the nose, whichever is open to the airflow, and the wings, the joints of the wings, known as the root of the wings, and the leading edge of your vertical stabilizer, the rudder, and leading edge of your horizontal stabilizers. That's it. Of course, the front end of the engines also. Engines basically eat up the air. Engines are eating the air, burning it, and creating a force which gives an equal and opposite force known as thrust. Thrust is generated by engines through Newton's third law of motion. So this static dynamic pressure, all of the air is being eaten up by the engines. And engines are not just eating it. Engines are eating it and storing it to create a more denser amount of air before they burn it. They don't actually store it, but they compress it before burning it. They compress it as it reaches behind. This happens in jet engines. In propeller engines, we can change the angle of the propeller blades to increase the thrust, just like we change the angle of the blade, known as the angle of attack. But when we talk about static and dynamic pressure is always acting on all sides of the airplane. Dynamic pressure is only acting to those surfaces which are facing the relative airflow. And these surfaces will be subjected to total pressure, which will be dynamic plus static. In case your plane is banking, this is straight and level flight, this is banking. Whenever you want to turn, you don't just turn like this, you bank and you turn. Whenever you are banking, the sides of the airplane, the fuselage and the wingtip are then subjected to static pressure and a little bit of dynamic pressure related to the airflow. Those are the times when you face certain errors on your air data instruments, which you learn in your navigation. Your plane will never fly like this. It is not designed to fly like this. The wings are designed to be like this, while the plane is designed to be like this. Sometimes you will feel the plane is like this, only in rare occasions during takeoff configurations. That is, your plane will not land like this. It will always be like this, even in landing also. That is the reason we keep a negative angle of attack, so that we can be on ground and land on ground. Or else landing will be like this always.
Roger, with the time.
So I had one doubt.
Yeah.
So the modern jet engines, do they work on principle of thermal expansion or airflow? Like,
Thermal expansion happens during combustion everywhere. So we won't say they work on principle of thermal expansion. That is not the principle behind them. But whenever a compressed air is burnt with added fuel, something that is happening in your engines, the fuel and air mixture on combustion expands because of the thermal reactions. And when it expands, it generates a huge temperature and a force of expansion that is directed to go out of the engine. And while this force goes out of the engine, it moves on to further elements of the engine like the turbines. And then the exhaust velocity, which whatever is left, gives us the but the expansion does happen. So thermal expansion does happen, but we'll not say that it is a principle of thermal expansion. When we say principle, it becomes the guiding law behind it. Thermal expansion will happen everywhere, of course. If we won't get the expansion, then we will not get the force, basically. Yes, Likit?
Sir, a lift is produced because of Newton's third law or Bernoulli's theorem?
Because of Newton's third law, or say again?
Bernoulli's theorem.
We get thrust because of Newton's third law. Thrust. We don't get lift because of Newton's third law. Lift is generated because of the Bernoulli's theorem only. Something that we are going to see.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Pash?
Sir, how drags helps in landing?
If your drag is more, your thrust reduces. Thrust is your forward motion. During landing, you need to reduce your air speeds, right? Your airspeed is directly proportional to your thrust. So if you're increasing your thrust reduces automatically. So during landing, drag will help us reduce the airspeed because it is opposite. If thrust increases, drag reduces to a certain point before drag increases again. But when drag increases, thrust will definitely reduce. So drag is like this, drag we cannot ever get rid of. Drag will always be there till the time you stop the aircraft. A drag can impair your airspeed, but airspeed cannot impair drag much. You will think, okay, I will increase the airspeed to reduce the drag. The more airspeed you increase, the more drag you will create. It is like that. But drag, if you increase more, it can reduce airspeed. So we use the same elements like flaps that augment our lift during takeoff to create drag during landing, and they are known as air brakes. There are spoilers also that create drag. There are reverse thrusters that create drag. And in high-speed jet aircrafts, you'll see they deploy parachutes also to create drag on landing.
Affirm, sir.
Good. So you understood everything so far. How do you find it? Is it easy? Is it difficult? Or is it interesting? Easy and interesting, difficult and interesting.
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 Easy, interesting.
It's
Yeah,
fascinating.
interesting.
Arpita, Sujal, Varun,
It's
Hussain.
interesting, sir.
Yes, sir.
It's
It is
fascinating to me.
Easy and interesting, sir.
Only one person is saying easy and interesting. Huh? Very nice. Okay. How many of you all are finding it difficult to understand so far? Raise your hand. You can raise your hand. Don't be shy to admit. Okay. So the next time when you make a paper plane, will you know how to design it so that you can get maximum amount of flight time in your paper plane? Do you think you can design it in a way to create drag and make it stall? Will you realize that the force with which you throw it can increase your lift up to a certain point? Then do you think you'll realize the angle at which you throw it? If you throw it with the upper angle, it will simply stall. Or sometimes if it's a bad design, it can still fly. Try to think that when you do it the next time. It does not have the aerodynamic properties of the wing, as in the cross section, but it does have something that the Wright brothers, used to fly. Before we end the session, I'm going to show you this magic shape. And this magic shape is going to be there with you till the end of your aerodynamics. You cannot study aerodynamics without sketching this shape in your notebooks. It is like that. So the factors influencing lift is the first. Cross-sectional shape of the wing of an aircraft. Note, wings are the main lift generating parts of a fixed wing aircraft. What is a fixed wing aircraft? The aircraft whose wings are fixed. All right. What is this cross-sectional shape? This is that cross section of any wing, the magic shape. This is the shape which is known as aerofoil or airfoil. Leading edge of the airfoil, trailing edge of the airfoil, upper camber. This curved part that you see is known as camber, very important. Lower camber. Whenever you see leading edge, it means that part is facing the relative airflow. All right, everyone. The second factor that I'll just write down is angle of attack. The third factor is airspeed. The fourth factor is air density. See, air density indirectly means how much air is available at that particular point in time. The denser the air, the better the lift that you will get. Another very most important factor, number 5, is the so first factor is definitely the shape. Second factor is angle of attack. Third is the airspeed. Fourth is the air density. And fifth is the surface area of the wing. Thus, giving rise to the lift formula. Lift is equal to half rho v square CS. Something so simple to understand, and the definition here becomes so easy to understand. Half rho v square talks about the density and the dynamic airflow. C talks about coefficient of lift. We call it the coefficient of lift. The coefficient of lift actually has angle of attack and airspeed. These two things are always in your control. And this definitely is the surface area. Can be fixed or variable. Sometimes you can increase the surface area, mainly during takeoff. In straight and level flight, that is in cruising altitudes, you keep the area to be fixed. In those times, just correct the statement here, you'll get confused. Fixed during straight and level, variable during landing and takeoff. And this is density and the dynamic pressure. Half rho v square is basically talking about the Bernoulli theorem or Bernoulli principle that we're going to study in future classes happening here. All this is happening around aerofoil. Okay, class, that's it. You are very quiet and very patient. I like that. I hope you're getting it. I hope you're understanding it. And I hope you'll tell me if you're facing any difficulties or doubts. Remember these points. They are very critical. I'm going to try my best to make it as easy as it is to understand. But if you find it easy and if you find my language simple, don't take these concepts for granted. Don't think like we say, "Na, ye to kuch bhi nahi hai, junior KG ka bachcha bhi kar lega." Definitely, you can teach it to a kindergarten kid if you know how to teach. These things can be anything. You all are beginners, you're learning it for the first time. I'm not treating you all as kindergartens, of course, but I'm treating you all as like very, very little kids when I'm teaching you all. Once your base is strong, I'll graduate you all and I'll teach you with a few heavy terms to make and give you the best of all worlds. All right. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. It's okay to make mistakes. But if you don't keep a check on your personal growth, and if you don't keep me in the loop whether you're learning or not, then you will find yourself hanging. Okay? Hanging in between knowing and not knowing, passing and not passing. And the between is not good. You need to be at the side of knowing, and you need to be at the side of passing. Okay? What we are learning right now is important to clear your papers, of course. Much more important is to clear all your future interviews at ATPL level also. All right? Never forget this. Make a separate personal notebook for your air technical notes. Keep them as a guide for the rest of your lives. We were lucky to have good instructors when we were students. And our notes are traced in our memory right now, to be honest. This was the level of training they did. And they always used their hands, nothing else. It created so much of understanding that we never scored less than 90-95. Because we just followed what they asked us to do. So you are in good hands. And keep it up. Enjoy. Whenever you find yourself not enjoying, let me know. We'll do something about it. Okay? Any doubts you have, drop me a message. I'm signing off. You have a very good afternoon, everyone. I'll see you all in the next class. Stand by for the next schedule for the next week for technical.
Thank
Okay?
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir.